The group of delinquent teens always found themselves in trouble, skipping school to hang out at the arcade instead. Among them, there was one boy who was considered the weakest link. The others would bully him relentlessly, taking advantage of his vulnerability. One day, they came up with a sick idea to use him as bait to lure out the water ghosts that supposedly haunted a nearby lake. They tied his hands and a rope around his waist, leading him towards the lake. The weakest link, terrified and covered in bruises, was forced to walk into the deeper end of the lake. Every time he tried to escape and run back to shore, the other teens would taunt him and beat him up. He was exhausted from holding his breath underwater and running back to shore multiple times, tears streaming down his face as he cried inconsolably. One of the bullies, fed up with the weakest link's attempts to escape, hit and kicked him several times before ordering him to kneel down. Then, he pressed the boy's head underwater, causing him to struggle and fight for air. The other two bullies joined in, holding him down until he stopped moving. The bullies looked at each other in shock, realizing what they had done. Panicked, one of them tried to revive the weakest link with chest compressions and mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, but it was too late. The boy was lifeless. One of the bullies suggested calling the police, but the others stopped him. They decided to throw the body into the lake and promised never to speak of what had happened that day. The weakest link's spirit, however, would not rest. It sought retribution against those who had wronged him. That night, one of the bullies heard a loud scream in his room. A voice spoke. "An eye for an eye, I am here to avenge myself." The bully sat up on his bed and looked around in fear, seeing his belongings got thrown off the shelf on their own and the light flickered. Then the light stopped flickering and turned off completely. Now the room had become pitch black, with a bit of moonlight through the window giving it some illumination. He saw the window curtains started flaring outward as someone was behind it. He felt like he was choking, unable to scream, as he saw a figure drenched in water crawl out from the curtain towards him. The bully tried to move, but his body was in a catatonic state, with his hands pinned up against the headboard. Overwhelmed with fear, his eyes widened, staring at the ghost figure as it crawled near the bed. Out of sight for a brief second, then the bully saw a pair of wet hands planted firmly on the bed linens. Slowly it lifted up its head, the ghost of the weakest link, bloated and covered in bite marks, with the same clothes he wore before he died. Hence, the ghost mounted the bully, with water dripping down onto the bully's clothes. The bully felt completely drenched in water, causing him to feel as if he were drowning. Water filled his lungs. As he tried to scream, he started choking and coughing. His body turning pruny and the skin of hands started peeling off as he tried to pull them forward. He gasped for air, coughing up water as he felt his life slipping away in an agonizing way. The next day, his mother found his lifeless body sitting upright on the bed, soaked and horrifying. His belongings laid strewn on the wet floor. The consequences of their actions had come back to haunt them, and the bullies would pay the price for their cruelty. The spirit of the weakest link would not rest until justice was served. After witnessing the horrific sight, his mother fainted. Without further ado, the dad called up the police. The other two bullies called up each other once they got up, but they were not able to get a hold of the third bully after multiple calls. Not knowing what is going on, they decided to go visit him at his place. While walking down the country road, the rapeseed flowers glistening under the sun out in the fields on both sides of the road. In the distance, next to a dirt mount, they both saw a lone figure standing still with its head slouched down. Perplexed by what they saw, they tried to look ahead and ignore the figure. Suddenly, the wind started gusting up for a few brief minutes. Both lifted up their arms to protect their faces immediately. After the wind stopped, one of the bullies told the other bully these strange occurrences could be telltale signs of a bad omen. It could be the ghost of weakest link coming back to haunt them and seek revenge. "Don't be paranoid. There are no such things as ghosts," the other bully retorted. Then he pushed the other bully to keep walking. Now they noticed the lone figure near the dirt mount had disappeared out of thin air. They picked up the pace. Upon arrival at their friend's house, they saw a few police cars parked outside. The mother was sobbing, and his dad was trying to console her, while a detective was trying to obtain a statement from both parents. Several police were also at the scene. Getting anxious after seeing all the police outside their friend's house from a distance, they thought their friend had likely turned himself in. The police would come after them next. In the meantime, they agreed unanimously to find a secluded place to hide. One of them suggested a place he knew, his parents' old house that he still had access to. Plus, it was located in a secluded spot in the countryside, so they would be safe there. By the time they arrived at the house, it was already nightfall after trekking several miles on foot. Tired and famished since they hadn't eaten anything all day, at this point they just wanted to go sleep and brainstorm how to evade the police the next day. His parents' old house wasn't that big. It only had one room, a kitchen, and an outhouse. Since he was the only child, so he would sleep with his parents when he was a young kid, on a bamboo mat that was laid on the cement floor. That night, they both slept together on the bamboo mat. After they fell asleep, not long after they got woken up by a loud thump. The door leading into their room had swung open, although the bully did latch it before they went to sleep. Both sat up and startled by the loud noise. Then they noted there were several footprints on the ground. The footprints were wet and muddy. As they scanned the room, more footprints materialized around them as created by an invisible person. Terrified, both of them dashed for the door, then the door shutted by itself right in front of them. Trapped inside the room, feelings of dread washed over them. They kneeled down and started pleading the ghost for mercies. Bound by hatred, the ghost would not relent from punishing them after what they had done to him. Water started trickling down from the ceiling, and the weakest link's ghost had materialized before them. His face no longer bloated and covered in bite marks. Now he showed a clear face with angry expression. His eyes stared back at them with intense glare. The body of one of the bullied levitated off the ground, then got thrown backwards. The door opened up and his body got flung outside, laying on the ground, struggling to get back up on his feet. Then his body got lifted up while still in a kneeling position. His body started contorting, his face grimacing with agony. His arms started twisting. The bones in his arms were cracking and snapping out of his skin. He let out a loud bellow in agony. No sound came out except a surge of blood gushed out from his mouth. Blood filled his lungs, choking and coughing up more blood. Soon after, his life slipped away and his body flopped onto the ground. "Why did you do this to me?" The angry voice of the ghost echoed through the air. Overwhelmed by fear, the other bully kept on kowtowing and begging the ghost to spare his life. He told the ghost he attempted to save his life, but the ghost didn't want to relent, thirsting for revenge. He made the bully to kowtow more vehemently.